Every video game series from Super Mario to Grand Theft Auto, Final Fantasy to The Sims, Danganronpa to Tropico, every video game series, no matter how big or how long, began as just a single video game, but before that, they began as ideas. Ideas in the head of one person, or a group of people, about what they want this experience to entail, what they want their audience to feel. And you could say at this point that said vision exists in its purest form, sometimes, but not always, as just and only the vision of what the creator had in mind, who will proceed to shape it the very best they are able until it releases to the public. And as more minds join in consuming, the dreaded thing happens. Reception. I didn't like this. I would change this. I hope in the next one this will happen. I want to play as a piece of tofu. Numeric values fly like vultures around a carcass. Review scores, sales, time played, all to validate the developer's execution. And now that original idea begins to warp and stretch. Each individual complaint or compliment is a seed dropping into the fertile soil that is the creator's mind. Input that has the chance to grow into something much bigger. I don't know if these metaphors are doing it. We'll get literal. Paper Mario is one of the easiest examples. First game sets the stage, second game greatly expands the stage literally. Super Paper Mario is where we start to see a fork, and Sticker Star is where we start to see a knife and a corpse. Super Paper Mario had already cast aside a lot of the RPG mechanics in favor of simple platforming, but still had a tense human story about why you will burn in hell for loving someone. It was still wacky. On the Wii, it's not really shocking that it became the best-selling in the series, and then Nintendo created Sticker Star, Nintendo fans 9/11. If Super Paper Mario had done well while reducing the depth of the gameplay, Sticker Star completely removed anything remotely fun about Paper Mario, previously a series with lots of original and humorous bizarre takes on the Mario universe, and replaces it with a level-based, minimally scripted RPG with no experience points. Why did they do this? Because in a Club Nintendo survey, less than 1% of fans said that they found the plot of Super Paper Mario interesting. Must have surveyed a bunch of them illiterates. And thus, the fan feedback grew into something much bigger. All gimmicks, no plot. Its prior identity was one many people liked. Maybe not a ton of people, because not everyone likes RPGs, I fucking know that for a fact. But it gave that up for a conventional face so that even more people could at least find one thing they liked or recognized in this game. Personality for popularity. But with this game and Color Splash taking the sales downward, more attention was paid to the fan feedback, where people are requesting a return to form. And even though the Switch's Origami King still has lots of issues, it at least tried bringing back partners, taking the plot a little bit more serious while offering humorous interludes. And then we got Thousand Year Door HD, so many Nintendo fans consider this a course corrective win. Such is the power of input. If enough people complain about Pokemon Black and White not having any old Pokemon in the wild until the post-game, you can bet your ass that Pokemon Black and White 2, as well as every other game that came after, would not do this again. They don't want to risk upsetting fans and turning down potential sales, which to most people is a good thing and actually quite miraculous if you think about any situation where Game Freak listened. But it's not like the team did this for no reason. Black and White had soft reboot intentions, and having only the new Pokemon until after the Elite Four was meant to make it feel new to everyone, veteran to the series or not. And some people liked how it forces you to focus on the new Pokemon, the discovery that comes along with that, and picking a fucking monkey. If enough people complain about the mole in Animal Crossing who trolls you every time you don't save, zap, he gets lighter dialogue, he becomes optional, he gets removed altogether. And I get it, I wasn't crazy about Rossetti either.
You stupid!
These games were my home away from home, and if I wanted to have a grown adult yelling at me for something I'd forgot to do, I'd just go downstairs. But you know what? He's one of the most memorable characters in a video game ever, a punishment taking up the flesh of a face and personality, and I never forgot to save because of it. Don't worry, we're gonna talk about Animal Crossing a lot today. It also works the opposite way too. If enough people play Yakuza 7 and say, oh damn, the hot goth Korean girl was such a cool character, I sure do wish she was a playable party member, bitch, you just know Yakuza 8 will have that. But what if it was always the director's intention that there be some distance between party member and head of Shadow Organization to show that as a character, she's way too busy leading people from the underground to join your party, but is still a valuable ally, until said director leaves the Ultra Money Company after Yakuza 7, and Sega decides, screw all that nonsense, give the people what they want. By the way, none of this is real, I'm just conspiring. Perhaps the simplest and most recent example I can give is of last year's Elden Ring pause button debacle. Some people think that you should be able to pause Elden Ring. Its quality of life, its accessibility. This is a 60-hour game. If someone is going to give that level of time to a game, that game should at least provide them the flexibility of being able to play it when their time might not be the most flexible. Alana Pierce, who kind of kicked all this off, talks hypothetically about playing Elden Ring while also looking after a 2-year-old child. Holy shit. I don't know anyone who wants to get their ass kicked that much. It's just the game was intentionally created without one. It's the vision of From Software that this experience not be the easiest and that you feel the rush of combat or the consequences of going idle, so that safety and peace when it does come, you will too. It's a reward. This is where it gets a little tricky, because sometimes the original vision for the game is not compatible with what most people will enjoy, what will help the game sell best, and each time sequel territory is approached, a decision has to be made. At best, you can see these changes as an increase in quality. For most, that's what it's designed to be, a win-win situation between company and consumer with a better game as a result. But at worst, you will see the quirks of a franchise's DNA disappear in favor of money. And as 99% of video games are created with money in mind, the push to get people behind the game makes sense. But how often does a game get behind the people? Often, actually. Pretty often. That's not too shocking, right? We live in the age of the sellout, the grifter. I feel like it happens more within TV when you have a niche or cult following show that tries to go mainstream and in the process flattens out its own identity. But game companies are no different. They'll do anything it takes to get more eyes on their game. But what of that original concept? How much does that warp, and what beloved aspects will be left behind in favor of general appealability? And as a creator, at what point does it become less for you and more for them? Oops, I put that line in third person. That's because this is a dilemma that I'm faced with pretty often myself. I make YouTube videos, I think, and I like to make these videos mostly for me, but there are times where I have made things that I was less interested in, but I knew would make for an enjoyable video for someone. And I, too, when creating a new video, take deeply into consideration the feedback from previous endeavors. It's been voiced to me various times through the comment section that some of you don't necessarily like that I swear. And there were some videos where I tried to remove any cussing, but I like getting passionate in the moment. I like intense emotion, and at the end of the day, these are my videos, bitch. There's definitely a line. Creating is fun. Creating for others can also be fun, but it is less for you. But it could be for you if you want to create for others. And if that's the case, I'm not here to bash. In fact, I'm really not here to bash objectively at all. That's a lie. I always am. But I more so would like to just focus on the consequences of the decision. What was lost, what was gained, why it happened, if it was successful. Today, we're going to explore some examples of video games homogenizing themselves for popularity, but we should also keep in mind that not every choice necessarily means that an eccentricity is sacrificed in the process. Sometimes a creative decision is done to appeal, but not necessarily a result of abandoning framework, just more so natural evolution. Mario went 3D when Nintendo made a console capable of making them that way. Final Fantasy picked up voice acting. Grand Theft Auto fully embraced freedom in an open world. Obviously, these are choices that'll rake more people in, but it comes at a relatively low cost when Mario is still about jumping and Grand Theft Auto is still about... They should change. If a series that's been around for decades with several entries still looked the same in its first game as it did its last game, that would also be an issue. Recently, I've spent a lot of time watching my friend Live Fuka play through the Metal Gear Solid series. These games range from 10 to almost 30 years old, and despite that, it's beautiful to watch someone experience them as if they were brand new.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
It took a rather bittersweet turn where the laughs ended and the yearning began. You can only rewatch these games you enjoyed so many times before you have to remind yourself the answer to the question of what ever happened to Metal Gear? What indeed happened to this fantastic series? Oh, that's right. Konami fired the creator, released the last game unfinished, made a spin-off zombie survival game, and pachinko machines. Anyone who's played Metal Gear will understand the irony of a group of people so desperate for money they sell out one of their own. I wouldn't have had any issue with Konami pursuing methods of mass appeal. Metal Gear Solid 5 was an open world game starring a big Hollywood actor. They were already on top of that. But 5 still does that funny Metal Gear thing where if you imagine it, the game will allow it. From the AI to the physics to the... This is a Hideo Kojima game through and through. Everything after September of 2015 was quite clearly at the cost of the game's soul. No, it's just straight up a hostile takeover, kicking out Kojima and then saying, "Big Boss needs your wallet." They took this man's work, a name people had attached to and grew up with, and slapped it on gambling, zombies, microtransactions, NFTs. Dude, this was such a dark time. The best thing to happen to Solid Snake in these years was when he got brought back for Smash, but even then, games that traded ass for ESRB. This was a really obvious example, to the point where even Konami realized they couldn't take this any further, let the backlash hit like a foot on Gray Fox, hung the series up for a bit, started doing re-releases, and as of this year, remakes. And I played Metal Gear Solid Delta. Actually, it was the first game I played after my thumb healed. It was much more one-to-one than I thought it was going to be, but I liked it. And even though we'll never see a Metal Gear game from Kojima again, I still think of this as a rather lucky example. After years of the hashtag F Konami, big company tried to put Snake in a money pit. They mostly failed, learned their lesson, and are kind of redeeming themselves. It's debatable, because the only thing that can be worse than taking a hard right and failing is when you take a hard right and succeed. This is like trying on an old high school uniform, like 5 years after you graduated, because you want to see if it still fits. And it does. When I make a video about video game series that traded personality for popularity, Animal Crossing is most certainly in the room with us. I come from a time when Animal Crossing was about the animals. The attraction of the game was not about designing or decorating or working. I mean, you could still do that stuff to a degree, but the main act was about the human to animal antics, which is why here in America, the commercials had a mock reality television theme. It was the best way they could market it, which the creator also admitted would be a challenge. The closest comparison they had wasn't even a video game. It was the concept of taking a bunch of big, rude, pestering, endearing, criminal, bashful personalities and throwing them smack dab in the middle of a forest with an unsuspecting player, and the story starts from there. If you hated them, you were stuck with them. Even if you found one you liked, you could just wake up to them being gone one day. It was a social sim with bold italic placed on the social, one where everyone was equal and the animals would be the first to remind you that you ain't special, blah. But 4 games later, you are very special. Animal Crossing is all about you little dummy. The GameCube had a very weird character where all of Nintendo's mainstay franchises were trying out new things on it, and Animal Crossing, even as the first in its series here in the US, definitely perpetuated that reputation. Simply put, it was whack. When it moved to the DS, a portable handheld usually in the ownership of a single person, a console belonging entirely to them, the series followed suit by allowing more customization, letting you make the experience really feel like it was your own. That's custom designs on the ground, dyeing and changing your hair, and even multiplayer so that you could show it all off. You could argue the series was shifting focus as early as here in its second game, but the tone did not let up at all. There were still strange holidays, and I, personally, believe that the NPCs got even spicier with this entry because they could now be dickbags to one another. City Folk is where we start to see some of the personality dry up. I mean, for one, Creative Recession, this game is a tag-along to Wild World. The villagers were getting softer and more repetitive, the events of the day more predictable. I've made many Animal Crossing videos in the past if you guys want some Yap DLC on this entire transition. But the most important thing that stems from City Folk is its very low sales. If you're on the Wii in an established franchise and a genre perfectly geared to both casual and hardcore, and you're selling this much, give up. Give up, join an MLM. Nintendo studies, they take the fan feedback, and they create New Leaf, the first game to cast you as the star. And yes, you could say by New Leaf that Nintendo had already dealt away a lot of the series' special flavor, but this game had so many new things, they had filled in the gaps with additional content. Enter New Horizons, the game that made a lot of cuts and didn't do any gap filling. Oh God, we're bleeding out. You choose the villagers, you choose what they wear, you choose where they live, you choose if they live on your island. When the villagers were mean and territorial, it strangely felt more immersive. Like, why is this adorable cat just roasting me right now? Video game dialogue doesn't do that. It's no surprise that a game built on interactions would need to switch up its dialogue in order to stand out, but that's what made it feel so sincere. I can vividly remember going from those rough first impressions in Wild World to when my brain overrode the autopilot of reading text in a video game, realizing I was straight up being bullied, to how honored I felt when I received a villager photograph from my homeboy Static. Progression wasn't built on resource collection and having the coolest island and villagers. It was all in the taming of the sarcastic lion, finding peace and place in a new community. And when that vulgarity was sacrificed, New Horizons replaced it with unconditional love. I don't want that shit. The villagers admire me endlessly. I could beat the pixels out of them with a net, push them into holes. They'll still tell me they love me. Rather than have some of the most obscurely genuine moments in a video game with NPCs who felt reactive, you can just make it all about you. Ego bait. What better way is there to sell anything to anyone than to just center said thing around them? Of course, a game where I get to customize an island and have my friends visit it and post it online so it and I can get attention, trading away the literal personalities of the game and the moments you had with them privately in order for a chance at popularity. Of course, that game is going to sell good. You need some dumbass disease to make it sell better? Not far away from Animal Crossing and colleagues is the classic series Fire Emblem. Now, if you already thought this video was jumbled and unhinged rantcore enough, then may God have mercy. Avatars. Fire Emblem Awakening was the first stateside in the series to feature a customizable playable character at the game's helm, one who is involved in and critical to the story, and the series has not let it go since. This isn't a dig against Awakening though, I do like Awakening, but it actually changed quite a bit of Fire Emblem. You wanna know what else started right about here? Marriage, that's right, nobody loved each other before 2013. Ooh, intelligent systems, combining an insert main character and marriage, aka waifus. Now you're playing with Fire Emblem. Now, if only we could do something about that permadeath mechanic, like maybe there's a way characters don't really have to die, and I don't necessarily think Fire Emblem traded its personality for popularity, although Awakening definitely diluted the focus with its new mechanics, inviting the casuals in. I'm not being a gator right now, it's literally called casual mode, with things like ship culture and an abundance of 2D girls and boys, meaning these once brutal war games that joysticks said were going to ruin your life became very forgiving and rich in character relations. Anyone can pick up Awakening and find something they like about it, even if strategy RPGs aren't your thing. This could be the gateway drug, which is honestly awesome. Awakening is a great game. It's when we get to Fates that things get brackish. Much of Fire Emblem Fates' controversies has to do with how much it attempted to expand this new territory. Fates was seen as too easy, poorly written to warrant 3 versions, turning up the fan service tropes, and just kinda too far in the realm of simulation. Not to mention, the getting married and having a child unit was actually pretty well written into being a mechanic for Awakening. In Fates, you know it's just here because people liked it in Awakening. Come on, Pocket Dimension, that's the entire game. Just here because people like it in Awakening, but it still sold sugar. Then guess what happened next year? A remake of classic Fire Emblem that sold not as well, probably because it came out after the Switch, but for the fan base, a conclusion had been reached. Fire Emblem's new mechanics became so popular, Nintendo knew they had to cash in. They created a mobile gacha called Fire Emblem Heroes. I don't feel like I need to explain this, but just TLDR from the perspective of an internet user between 2007 and 2017. Discussing Fire Emblem Online is now a lot more than just a conversation about classes and weapons. Now the conversation is about what Fire Emblem character you want to fuck. And to be fair, I'm also a part of that conversation, Cornelia, but you can't blame this series for doing what it had to survive. Understand that Fire Emblem had been on life support. I love the Tellius duology, but these games were commercial failure after commercial failure. They had been trying to get new crowds interested forever. Gaiden chapters weren't doing it. If FE13 did not do something, then Nintendo was going to permadeath the series itself. So even if some fans dislike it, and even if it led to things like Fates or Engage or endless discourse about what people want from a Fire Emblem game, it is undeniably the reason that Fire Emblem is still here today. It saved it. It does lead to an interesting little question though, of if you'd rather have a failing series alter its identity or discontinue altogether. I asked to fans of dead franchises, would you have traded a little bit of that personality away to get the numbers up and revitalize the series? It's one of the reasons I think when we finally see Punch-Out or F-Zero return, they're gonna look a little bit different. Persona 3 was Atlus's near-identical solution when the company was also in rough waters. It took a niche, hardcore dungeon crawler JRPG and introduced simulation mechanics and a calendar system. No longer would you have to find locations on a world map. It was done via a menu, and instead of several little dungeons, all with their own vibe and music and personality, it was replaced with one giant shadow-filled Amazon warehouse. And again, this is where I started. I love Persona 3. I'm not saying it's a bad game, let's be clear about this. And I honestly think people undersell how much it tried to stay in touch with its roots. Persona 3 still has a moon phase system and giant faces on the wall. It's still very much an SMT disciple like 1 or 2. Scheduling the game with an even set of RPG and high school student mechanics, and you know, not letting me control my teammates even though the first game's, you know what, on second thought, fuck Persona 3. You want to know what returning to your roots really looks like? Persona 5. People had been clamoring for things back like guns, negotiation, demon encounters instead of shadow blobs. Persona 5 does all of that while keeping the new Sona formula tight and strong. You just gotta love the respect they have. Video games that traded personality for even more personality. I love Persona 5. I love Persona 5. I love Persona 5. But I do miss Persona 1 and 2, and basically every time Atlus made a brutal to play, even more brutal to understand conceptually Conception RPG before Persona 3. For the fucking life of me, these games, I can't figure out who they were trying to target, which is why I don't think they were trying to target anybody at all. You can't look at a game like Nocturne, which was their best-selling game beforehand, and tell me this was Atlus trying to set up a blockbuster cash cow record breaker title. No. This is unapologetically original, a team creating something they wanted to, even if most people wouldn't be able to vibe with its difficulty, learn the mechanics, and reason with the plot and characters. But this was at the same time as Demi-Kids, which is the opposite of original and not intending to secure a bag. What I mean to say is that the search was always there, and once Atlus finally struck it with Persona 3, it just never ended. Persona 3 has managed to re-release itself on at least 4 momentous occasions. Persona 4 is doing similar, and Persona 5 as well, not to count the bajillion spin-offs and long-lasting period in between where people think a sequel will never happen. It took 9 years for Persona 5, and we have officially beat that as of now. Within that, there's a deeper, more prone to loss fear anytime a departure pays off, which is that the series is taking up an identity that it will rely too hard on and perhaps never let go of. Super Princess Peach and New Super Mario Bros. Both came out on the DS within months of each other, at least here in the US. One sold 30 million copies, the other almost 2. One is a redux of the formula that had existed for 20 years, and the other is a brand new perspective with brand new gameplay. One spawned 4 sequels, the other, I guess you could call it one last year. And which is the better game? Oh, it's absolutely New Super Mario Bros. But that doesn't mean I wanted the rest of the DS and the Wii and the 3DS and the fucking flaccid Wii U to be defined by only New Super Mario Bros. And nothing else. Nintendo was insufferable with the quote, New Super Mario Brosification of not just 2D Mario, but like every adjacent game, an overly consistent, sterilized aesthetic that aimed to keep everything safe, familiar. At most, they would try new power-ups, but think back to Mario Land 2, the last of the original 2D line, before we ended up here. Sure, you've got places like the Tree Zone and the Space Zone, Demilitarized Zone, but also the Turtle Zone, the Pumpkin Zone, the Macro Zone. I understand, again, as someone who creates occasionally with the intention of winning over some people, that if you finally find something that works, wanting to commit eternally to that thing makes sense. Switch f***ing 2. When Resident Evil 4 came out, it took the series into action. Boom, 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 pow, pow. Nothing says more powerful next-gen console like more powerful white guy in a rural village. It was a departure from the previous tightly angled camera, ammo, famine, hilarious voice acting. Not that Resident Evil 4 doesn't have its moments.
It should keep you busy.
Can't remember the name, huh? A senior moment, perhaps.
Oh.
But of course, it was a huge success, and depending on who you ask, it was maybe too successful. Not only did Capcom refuse to let it die by porting it to every single home console after, yup, even the Wii U. Poor guy can't rest today. They ran this formula back with 5. Perhaps you're noticing a trend. First game with the new formula good, second game with the new formula ugh. And even though 5 had some very loud critics, that doesn't matter because 5 was their best selling game. It still is. And so they ran it back for 6, which is their second best selling game, both with a co-op function that only invited more copies to be sold. That's exactly what good, seclusive, atmospheric horror is, having a buddy right next to you the entire time.
And this is
Here, come.
But in the 2000s, I don't necessarily know if the old school Resident Evil could have made it. Capcom didn't just change the formula because they were like, we want to make an action game with a lot of... Actually, they did do that, but they were smart enough to allow that to become its own game. Devil May run up on it. So it's not like they took Resident Evil and tried to make it into something else for the sake of money. They did to the structure what they needed to do in order for it to stay relevant with gamers of the time. I haven't had lunch yet. I'm really hungry. I don't even know if what I'm saying is making Every game will have to change and grow and adapt to become a video game series, and whether they do this on their own footing by creating games they want to, or by creating the games we want them to, eagerly listening to every piece of fan input so they can maximize their audience and sales, is totally of their own volition. Some franchises try new things, some franchises go through things, some franchises sell out, some literally. Halo 4 was the first picked up by 343 after Bungie left, and it definitely feels like a new company being handed the next entry in a masterpiece franchise and looking for direction with it. Maybe that's why it felt so much like Halo 4 just took things from Call of Duty, which had already proven that people like endless sprinting, kill cams, spec ops, custom loadouts, yada yada. The plot feels more like a continuation just for the sake of a continuation, aka money, popularity, but who am I to decide that? All I think that matters is that if you're going to try to introduce foreign concepts into a series with the intention of drawing a new audience, that you stay respectful to the series' roots